Now, after Governor DeWine's dramatic plea yesterday that we all wear masks, he talked today about his statewide alert levels. Andrew Horansky joins What's New Now. And Drew, relatively good news on that front today.
Well, Jay, it was sort of a mixed bag. Yes, there was good news, there was bad news as well. If we were to go with a sort of wine with DeWine scale, I would say that today was maybe a little bit more of a rosé than a, let's say, a bitter acidic red. Let's start with the good news because I think we could all use some of that right now, right? 3 counties have been removed from the watch list. The governor announced that this afternoon. They are Hamilton, Butler, and drumroll, Cuyahoga County as well. All of them, as you know, had been on the brink of reaching the state's highest public health warning. Still, important to note here, none of them are in the clear. They're just seeing something of a plateau right now. There is still a very high chance of exposure to the virus in those counties. We can still mess this up, and I think that's a big take-home. We can undo that progress. Now, what I found especially interesting today was the details that the governor gave on what caused outbreaks in specific counties. They could, for example, isolate where a group of people returned from Florida and then spread the disease in that county. Governor DeWine also had a conversation with health directors today and shared his notes where these were some of the biggest culprits. Take a listen.
Block parties, neighborhood get-togethers, bars, churches. Mention, of course, about young people, and the data's clear. 20 to 29-year-olds, the numbers have gone up, dramatically. Travel, people coming back from traveling, and from hotspot states.
So as of right now, 19 counties across the state are still at level 3 or red. That does include Cuyahoga County. That means people are required to wear masks in those 19 counties starting tomorrow, of course, at 6 o'clock at night. That's going to go into effect. The governor says that includes, Jay, about 60% of Ohio. At the same time, stores tonight are requiring people to wear masks. We'll talk about which one's coming up at 6. A lot of interest, of course, in that as well, because stores taking matters into their own hands. And we will also break down some of the causes by county of what they're seeing there behind the COVID outbreaks. And it varies by location. It's really pretty interesting.
All right, Drew, we're looking forward to that, and we will see you at 6. Thank you very much.